In this video, we're going to discuss grip to sternum location. So I had a question about how guys like Jon Rahm will have more of a bowed wrist, or Jordan Spieth will have a really bowed wrist with a weak grip, and then how someone like a Dustin Johnson will have a bowed wrist with a strong grip, and so how grip orientation relates to the top of the swing position. Unfortunately, there's not a really clear correlation between starting grip and top of the swing position. But there's a really, really strong, almost intimate relationship between where the sternum is at impact and where the hands are at impact. And part of that is because there's a very small margin of where the club is going to be at impact in order to have a solid, tour quality shot. And therefore, there are only so many different body and wrist orientations I could use to get in that position. For example, let's say the club is going to be just slightly leaning forward, kind of roughly like this. If I was to get my body in a good tour impact position and then put my hands on the club, there are only so many different ways. You'll see in order to get some of these orientations, I end up having to move my sternum. So in order to keep it there, there's a smaller window than you would expect. So if I take a normal kind of neutral grip, about 25 degrees of extension of the lead wrist, and then fairly neutral with that trail wrist, and I get into that tour impact position, you'll see that the hands and the
examples. We're going to use two major references. We're going to look at where is the upper body in space. And for that, we're going to use the reference of the sternum, but we'll see more of that from down the line. And from the face-on view, we'll be able to see the strength of the grip at setup. So where is, how much extension do we have in that lead wrist, or in the weak grips, how much flexion, and how much has that changed to impact? Or looking at where the V's are pointing at setup. That can be helpful as well. So both of these golfers have stronger left-hand grips. Dustin definitely has a stronger right-hand grip, but Matt Kuchar has more of a neutral right-hand grip to accompany that strong left hand. So what we'll do is we'll take them from setup to impact, and we can see that Dustin had a lot of extension in his lead wrist at setup, and then at impact it's pretty much flat. So he's flexed his lead wrist a good amount, and he's accompanied that with a fair amount of body rotation. We can see that his chest or sternum is pointing well out in front of the golf ball. That'll be the face-on view. We'll have a better view of how strong or how weak the grip actually is, but from looking at impact position, if we kind of imagine almost perpendicular to the spine, you can see that Matt Kuchar's sternum would be pointing kind of just out in front of the golf ball, where Dustin Johnson, when hitting this drive, has his sternum pointing way out in front of the golf ball. It now makes sense, seeing how open he got his sternum, that he could have such a strong grip but have it bowed at the top of the swing and still fairly flat or muddy. So now if we take Jon Rahm and get him close to impact, or actually we can probably get him right at impact, you'll see that we've got a similar looking sternum position. You'll see that Dustin's a little bit more open, but you'll see that for all intent and purposes, you can see about the same amount of the rib cage. You can see it's kind of on about the same tilt. Their legs and pelvis have done a little different, but we can see that the rib cage, or the sternum, which is our reference point, is in a closest position. So they've used their grips to get the club back to kind of a similar position, and the way they did it is Dustin Johnson had a stronger grip and then bowed a fair amount. Jon Rahm had a weak grip and bowed a ton. And one trend you'll see from looking at a lot of the tour pros is that if you have a weak grip, there's no way around it. You pretty much have to bow that lead wrist in order to get good tour impact conditions. But if you have a strong grip, you can either bow and use a lot of body rotation, or not bow that lead wrist, keep that wrist relatively neutral, and not have as much body rotation. But hopefully this video helped you to see kind of the relationship between where the body is in impact and how it relates to the grip. If you stay behind the golf ball and you rotate, you'll need to close the club face to accommodate, either with a stronger grip or bowing the wrist, or both. And if you lunge and if you don't rotate, then you're not going to want to have a really flat left wrist, or you're going to want to gravitate towards a weaker grip.